watching Canadian Muslim news on Muslim Network TV. From Toronto, Ontario, I'm Catherine Bullock. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. Recently, migrant workers and their allies rallied across Canada demanding permanent resident status. We will talk to Syed Hussan, the Executive Director of the Migrant Workers Alliance for Change, about the rallies and their demands. But first, some news headlines. Military to help clear up Hurricane Fiona's rubble. National Council of Canadian Muslims announces new chief. Mayor John Tory inaugurates a new Islamic Centre in North York. Muslim leader Sheikh Yusuf alKaradawi passes away. Now the details. The federal government has approved Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island's request for military assistance in the hardest hit areas by Hurricane Fiona. Seamus O'Regan, Federal Minister of Labour and one of 7 MPs from Newfoundland and Labrador, says Canadian Rangers from 3 platoons will be deployed to provide assistance. O'Regan says 2 naval ships are stationed in St. John's to give any help needed. The 4-category hurricane has brought historical damage to Atlantic Canada. In Port aux Basques, Newfoundland and Labrador, the storm hit with 134 km/h winds, 77 millimeters of rain, and water levels rising over a metre. The National Council of Canadian Muslims has announced yesterday the selection of its new incoming Chief Executive Officer. Stephen Brown, a bilingual Muslim convert and a 6th-generation Canadian, will take over the reins of Canada's largest Muslim advocacy group. Brown has been involved with public advocacy and human rights issues for several years. Brown has worked with labour organisations in Quebec, including as manager of the Concordia Student Union Advocacy Centre. He has discussed Bill 21, civil liberties, Islamophobia and Muslims in Quebec in his various writings. A new Islamic Centre has opened Sunday in North York, Ontario. Toronto Mayor John Tory and the Canadian Council of Imams inaugurated the centre. It is called the Sayyida Aisha Centre. It includes a masjid and food bank. It will be the Canadian Council of Imams office. The centre will provide food, support, employment, education, and mental health services to the Muslim community. It is dedicated to all Muslims who lost their lives due to Islamophobia. Mayor Tory tweeted, saying it was great to connect with the Muslim community. He applauded them for their generosity to care for fellow Torontonians. Sheikh Yusuf alKaradawi, one of the Sunni Muslim world's most renowned religious scholars, has died today, confirmed by his official Twitter account. alKaradawi was the chairman of the International Union of Muslim Scholars and a spiritual leader of the Muslim Brotherhood. Born in Egypt, alKaradawi moved to Qatar in the 1960s. He was appointed Dean of the Faculty of Sharia at Qatar University. Later, he was granted Qatari citizenship. He was critical of the military coup that overthrew former Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi. alKaradawi authored more than 120 books that address Muslims from different sections of society. And that's it for the news. Thousands rallied across Canada a couple of weeks ago in 13 cities: Toronto, Montreal, Edmonton, Vancouver, Fredericton, and St. John's, Newfoundland, calling on the federal government to extend permanent resident status to undocumented people here. We are joined now by Syed Hussan, Executive Director, Migrant Workers Alliance for Change. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
You attended the rally, I believe, in Toronto. Tell us what it was like.
So we organized this demonstration in Toronto with about 3,000 people who marched on the streets to the Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland's office to call on the federal government to ensure full and permanent immigration status for all undocumented people without delay, as well as permanent resident status for all migrants. Parliament has returned this week, and as a result, we are calling on Parliament to ensure regularization for all without delay.
3,000 is a great number. Were you surprised that many showed up?
It is clear to us, and it should be clear to Prime Minister Trudeau, that people are very, very focused on the necessity for transformation and change in the immigration system. Currently, 1.7 million people in the country live without full and permanent immigration status, and as a result face exploitation and abuse. So we want the Prime Minister to see that not just in Toronto, but in 13 cities across the country, people are united to call for fundamental transformation. There is a historic opportunity right now to correct failures in the immigration system that has resulted in 500,000 people becoming undocumented, and the time is right to do the right thing.
Were there similar great numbers in the other cities?
Yeah, there was over 1,000 people in Montreal, hundreds of people in other cities.
So was that difficult to organize and coordinate?
Our focus is on building the power of our communities, and it's clear that migrants are self-organized and are able to mobilize in large numbers, not just on the streets, but also in terms of taking action on their farms and social media. Farm workers, for example, who couldn't participate in the major cities were outposting in their rural communities. Other people were joining online. There is a massive movement of migrants organizing together for full and permanent immigration status for all. And it is now up to the Parliament to do the right thing and to implement this program without delay.
One of the things that I'm not clear on, and maybe others in the audience feel the same way, how do people end up in Canada as undocumented?
So each year, Canada issues millions of temporary permits. These may be work permits, study permits, people who are making refugee claims. And most of those permits are non-renewable. And most of the people who don't have high-paying jobs don't have any access to permanent residency. So at one point or the other, everyone has a choice in front of them. They can either leave this country or they can continue to stay here without valid permits. And those who stay here without valid permits do so because of a number of reasons. There may be war where they come from. There may be discrimination. They may be facing a lack of economic opportunity. Or they have formed ties in Canada. They have built relationships. They've fallen in love. They've built a family. And so for all of these reasons, people make the incredibly difficult decision to stay here as undocumented. At that point, they're excluded from all rights and protections. And people live in daily fear of being arrested. They are working, they're paying taxes, but the employers are not paying taxes. Their landlords can exploit them. They can be mistreated. They're not able to access healthcare. And 500,000 people at least live in this crisis.
And there might be some amongst the audience who wonder, well, they're illegal now. Why should we do nothing but arrest them and send them out? How do you answer to those points of view?
I think we need to be clear. It's not possible to arrest and deport 500,000 people. And that if 500,000 people left, a lot of the economy would collapse. Right? If 500,000 people were working in, imagine who would work in their place. What would happen? They're paying, a lot of them are Canadian citizens, parents of Canadian citizens. Some of them don't have passports. It's actually physically not possible to deport them. They're from countries where there's war, so there's a restriction on being able to remove them. What we have to understand is that these people live here and work here. And we have an option of whether we will include them in the family of rights or we won't. If we include them in the family of rights, everyone is better off because they're already working. What this does is make sure that their bosses pay taxes.
Right.
All it's doing is giving people the ability to live here safely without fear and build deeper roots, and that has a lot more benefit than what it would cost to, essentially mobilize and try to arrest that many people and deport them. It's not a reasonable response to the crisis we're in. It is the failure of the immigration system that has created this moment because the government of Canada chose not to renew their permits. There is a path for rich people to get permanent residency, but most people who are poor and working class simply can't.
I do want to come back to that, but just quickly, and I know you've hinted at this already, but what does it make a difference to an undocumented worker to be on this path and then to get permanent resident status?
What it means, we recently asked our members, and the most common answer we got is it means freedom. It means the freedom to leave a bad job. It means the freedom to take care of your health. It means the freedom to be with your families. It means the freedom to walk on the street without living in fear. It means the basic dignity that each and every one of us deserves is extended to each and every person in the country.
On Tuesday, the government tabled a strategy for transitioning temporary workers and students to permanent resident status. And you were quoted in the media as saying this is not really a strategy at all. It's just rehashing. It's not going to help end the abuse. Can you help us understand what you mean by this?
Look, the Liberal government MP tables a motion in Parliament calling on the Liberal government to give a strategy, and then the Liberal government then produces a report about things they've already done. This is a pretty much, it's just politicking. This isn't where change is happening. No legislation has been tabled, no policies put on the table. What we can see, however, is that it is clear that the federal government is feeling the pressure. They're accepting that there is exploitation and abuse of temporary migrants. So it is necessary then to ensure that those people have rights. And the only way for migrant workers, students, refugees to have rights is to get full and permanent immigration status. So that remains the demand. I think we can just move past this, shuffling of paper between departments in government.
The Trudeau government has immigrant Canadians as part of its cabinet and elected, as well as other members of parliament in other parties. Do you feel that they should have a better understanding and help advance the agenda faster, or how do you explain this kind of foot dragging?
I think it's important to note that the entire immigration system has been changed in the last, 20 years, but particularly in the last 5 to 7 years. So many immigrants who've been here for more than that time actually don't understand how the system works anymore. There used to be a time that the majority of people who came into the country came as permanent residents. You could come here even if you didn't have a high-paying job in the country. That's no longer the case for most of the people. Most people who are coming here, right now, 1.2 million temporary permits are issued in the country as compared to around 400,000 permanent residents. So there's 3 temporary residents per permanent resident year upon year upon year. So I think the first thing is that whether it is in your audience or in the cabinet, people who may not realize that the system has completely shifted to a system of a temp agency, a revolving door immigration system where you come, you're chewed, used, and then spat out. But this isn't just about an immigrant rights fight. Whether we don't, it is about basic fairness and equality. If 1.7 million people in the country can be exploited more, paid less, be charged more for healthcare and education, then all of us suffer. Because if a boss knows they can treat 1 in 20 people differently, then the overall wages and working conditions are impacted. This is about lifting up all of us. There is absolutely no gain to any person in the country from having this system of temporary and undocumented migration. The only gain is to the super rich bosses who can make a huge amount of profit from putting people into dangerous and exploitative situations by paying them more and by charging them more. There are very few interests, right now, let me give you an example. We can all see that our food prices are going up. Food is so expensive, right? Do we think that increase in prices is resulting in the migrant farm workers who actually grow the food increase in wages? The answer is absolutely not, right? Bosses are making money while keeping migrants exploitable and precarious. We should unite to ensure that all of us have equal rights. And one of the ways to do that is to ensure that everyone in the country has the same citizenship rights.
Well, you've made a very clear call. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you very much for joining us on the show and talking to us about this.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching. If you like what we do, please share, like, and subscribe. Stay safe and God bless.